I'm Mason,
And I'm his brother Keith.
and welcome to the And His Brother podcast. Good morning to y'all. Thank you for tuning in once again. This week we're going to talk about self-exploration. A little different, I think, than growth. Obviously some overlap, which we'll get into a little bit, but yeah. I'm excited to talk about it.
Going to talk about kind of like what we're figuring out in ourselves, getting to know ourselves, a little bit of how you can do that, but mostly about like how we're doing that, what has worked and I guess not worked. So hopefully y'all find it helpful or have some like relatabilities to it, but yeah.
Or it could just be a mini therapy session for us and we just talk. And we just vibe together.
Shout out Craig.
Shout out Craig.
Small therapist.
And my old therapist.
Conflict of interest. Alright, we can keep going.
Okay.
Man, I gotta turn on
You gotta turn it on.
like myself.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, you gotta turn it on.
Get turned on.
Do you have a song that turns you up?
Not really. I wish. It's like 11:30.
Do I have a song that turns me up? Oh, actually, you know what's been really turning me up? Is, did you see that, we love, yes. Did you see Corday's new song?
No. I saw Hosier's new album.
Corday's new song, that's Tia. As the
Dude,
cover art.
what the heck? Also, I haven't seen the song. I didn't realize that. It
Yeah.
came out on my birthday. That's bizarre.
Yeah. She's really doing it.
I wish I could
Hey.
make money for being pretty.
Shout out to Tia. You can't see it. But shout out Corday, shout out Tia.
She love me not. She ain't got no.
Alright, stop it after like 10 seconds because I don't know copyright law. They're like, and we're taking that down. Although we're not making money off this, so it might not. Alright.
Do you know you're explaining yourself right now?
Do I know? Yeah, I think I'm exploring my capacity to handle stress. And I'm also kind of exploring like what I think I want to do for sure long term. I've always worked jobs for like a year or less, and I kind of like bounced around, got a lot of experience. And some of that was like, I was working college jobs and stuff like that. Or I knew I didn't want to be doing what I was doing. I did train for a while, but that was kind of like freelance. So it's like I could do that while I was working other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm trying to, the two things, like the stress for sure, like how I can handle it. I used to get really, really angry or really short when I felt like I had a lot
Yeah.
or felt overwhelmed. Like I didn't want to be bothered while I was handling it, and that's not super functional.
Yeah.
So I feel like those are two really big things I'm exploring myself. And then I'm like re-exploring like some of my like religious beliefs. Those are probably like the big three. Is like career, stress, religion. And then I think a little bit like I'm trying to find new hobbies because I keep getting injured.
Honestly, I feel that heavily.
Yeah, like I just had like my second knee surgery, and my hobbies at the time were like rock climbing every few months, skateboarding at least once or twice a week, jujitsu 2-3 times a week, and weightlifting like 5-6 days a week. And you can do none of those things. I mean, you can technically like rock climb on one leg, but like it's
I'm
not. But yeah, like in my brain, I'm like I want to be really good, so it wasn't like functional.
Yeah.
So I mean, even stuff like doing this podcast, right? Like, okay, what kind of hobbies, what kind of things do I like to create?
Yeah.
Because my body is going to wither away, and it's doing it rapidly.
Yeah. That's good. I was like, kind of asking that question because I felt like I recently kind of entered a space where like, it takes energy to explore. And
Yeah.
It takes, I think, in a lot of ways, it takes intentionality to start
intention,
to
yeah.
start to explore. And I feel like I was especially the last couple weeks, like prepping for the school year and prepping for, like teaching and all this stuff, like I've kind of like started to focus in on like the things I have to do, and I kind of put to the side some of the things that like I was originally exploring. So that's why I kind of asked.
Yeah.
I was like, do you know what you're kind of exploring right now? I feel like for me, kind of a lot of that same stuff. Definitely I feel like I've been exploring my capacity to learn. And what I kind of mean by that is like, outside of like a school setting, like how much information can I take in and retain and apply and truly understand. And I think especially putting myself in positions where like I have to teach others, you know, you gotta be able to learn as well. I feel like I've been exploring / kind of challenging myself as like a leader and like to kind of take, I don't want to say like risk, but just take on like more challenges. Like holding myself to a little bit of a higher standard at work, as a boyfriend, as like as a friend, which we talked about a couple weeks ago and last week, I guess. And so that's been something I'm kind of exploring, is like, where am I at with these things? Yeah. What kind of brother, what kind of boyfriend, what kind of teacher, what kind of worker, coworker do I want to be? And like figuring out how to do that. Yeah,
I think that's legit. I definitely feel like I gave a lot of thought to what kind of brother, I guess like family member, because I also like take into account like, because I'm like a little brother, obviously, so I'm a big brother to all, whereas like, or a big brother to you, no, I'm sorry, big brother to all of y'all. I got like a big brother to some as well, whereas like, I was gonna say, whereas you're a little brother, obviously, to all the siblings. So I think part of like, when I first moved back to LA, like that was some of what I was trying to evaluate, like who do I want to be in the family? Yeah. Too. So I've definitely I feel like I've explored that. I think I'm still practicing it, but I do think I know where I want to fit, at least. And I've like thrown jokes about it. Like I've told Mom, like, I'm in charge of the family now. But I'm like only a little bit kidding, because I'm like, okay, like I'm way more stable than I used to be. Like I have the time to be present for Toya, for Betsy. I'm visiting, I don't know if you know this, I'm visiting Chelsea in a few weeks because I have the financial means, which is a newer thing.
No one invites me to anything.
Yeah. Well, she was like, it was a group chat. She texted us.
Did. Yeah, she texted both of us.
Shoot, I gotta request a day off, I think. No. It's an evening flight. Okay, I was like, why did I do that? But yeah, so I think, that's something I don't think I'm doing as actively now, is trying to figure out where I fit socially, because I feel like obviously like in a classroom I'm a teacher, and I feel like I did spend some time when I first started like, what kind of teacher do I want to be? I will never be the teacher that's like, I'm not your friend. I'm not. But I won't
get it twisted.
Don't get it twisted. Yeah, there's definitely been times I'm like, stop your story. Don't tell me if you did something illegal. They'll be like, well, my mom was there. I'm like, that doesn't make it okay.
Stop saying that.
I literally said, that's neglect to one student. They go, how is that neglect? And I was like, your mom was there.
I feel like that's a line between like, I want to be friendly, and like I want us to have like there to be warmth. Yeah. But like
I want there to be warmth. I want there to be a lot of the kids I work with do not have like safe spaces, like even if it's not physical harm, like where they can fully be themselves. Yeah. So I like being that, but then there are like where they'll start talking to me like I'm a friend fully, and it's like I'm not that. Like I have one girl, she was like, B, you get me, and I'm like, still your teacher. Yeah. Don't call me that. Like, you know, and it wasn't like I didn't have to like crack down on her. She was like, my bad.
You established a line.
Yeah, but it was just like, no, there is. Yeah, and so, with some kids, especially when they're newer, like getting to know me still, it's like, because I come off so friendly, and I think some kids can tell that I'm really familiar with other kids, they're like, oh, I can just jump in, and sometimes I have to like, it might not even be reestablishing. It might be like, no, there is a line. Yeah. These kids just already know it, so you didn't see them cross it before.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Which I do, you know, I think it's fun. I think it's fun to know where you fit in those circumstances.
Absolutely.
So hopefully you can figure some of that stuff out.
Something that I that kind of reminded me of about like drawing that line, also something I'm exploring, is how I view myself and how I view myself affects the other way, like the way people treat me.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, and so like what we may or may not have talked about in some way or another on this podcast is like I'm very much like a people pleaser at heart, and kind of discovering that, you know, it's fine to like, I'm like a peacemaker, like I want things to like be okay, but sometimes it would be to the point where like I'd sacrifice like my own feelings or like my own comfort or blah blah, which again sometimes happens, but it's not a habit that you want to build, I'll tell you. But
keep going.
Yeah, there have been there's just been times where like I feel like, oh, I kind of lost my train of thought. Why'd you move? I'm just kidding. No, anyway, but all I was going to say is, I kind of realized, I caught the train. I kind of realized that it had to do with like the level of respect that I had for myself, where like it'd be sometimes like, oh, like I'm deserving to share my opinion right now, or like my opinion's not valuable, like or as valuable or whatever. It's like, oh no, like it is, and you can still voice your opinion and you can still find compromise without like losing people. That's a much more overarching, deeper thing for me. But in the context of like things that I'm exploring right now is even like I'm, you know, at the time that we're filming this, I'm getting ready to start teaching a college class, and you know, I'm 25, and these are going to be like juniors and seniors, and so we're very much in the grand scheme of things, we're peers, like age-wise. They're going to be like,
well, and you're going to have some people who are juniors,
there might
35.
Yeah, there might be people that are older than me, and there was something where I was like, I don't know if I want to be like, I'm Mr. Thomas, or if I just want to be like, I'm Mason.
I'm
like,
Master Thomas.
Yeah, I'm Master Thomas. And I was kind of like, you know, I want there to be a line of like professionalism and not hierarchy, but like, it's my class, blah, blah, blah. Like, I am still like in charge, like I still make the decision, but I also want there to be a level of like comfort and like friendliness and like and like warmth, and like this is serious in that, like, you know, the topic's serious and like it's your education and like I'm taking it seriously, but it's not so serious where it's like, you know, like I don't want to be the person that like snaps and like that's like Mr. This, like I don't. So I'm still trying to figure out which one I want to go with. I'm still leaning towards like just being Mason, or coach actually.
I like
I feel like coach would be kind of fun, because I am a coach in my other job. So, but yeah, that has a lot to do with like, okay, how am I viewing myself in the situation? How do I want them to view me in this situation? And again, it's my first time teaching. I might be like, all right, I'm gonna go by Mason, and then it could be a train wreck, and then if I get another class next semester, I could be like, cool, we're going to Mr. Thomas, or vice versa. But that is an example of something I'm exploring myself. Is like, how do I view myself? What do I think of myself in terms of like respect, and how much dignity and love do I deserve, and all these things.
No, those are real. And I think in my experience, like, how you respond to people, almost like not calling you what you want. Like, you're like, hey, I'm Mr. Thomas, and some like dude, in one of my like chem classes, so I was like 18 or 19, I had people who were like in their 40s, right? So you might be like, hey, I'm Mr. Thomas, and then there might be some like 50-year-old white dude who's like, I'm not calling you that. Like, just real, you know? And how you respond, in my experience, is like what really establishes hierarchy is probably the best word. It's not like you're above them, but it's like you are in charge. It is your class. You are running it. You have the prior information. Or you can say you're leading the class. You know, if that like feels better. Because I work. The eldest student I've taught was 21 when I was like 25. So like that age gap is not huge.
No.
And they, especially like in high school, like kids like to push the boundary of like, you know, my school email has my first name in it.
Yeah.
So it's not like a secret. And I definitely had a few kids like, oh, is that Keith? Like, da-da-da. And I'm like, I don't play that game. Like, I don't think I'm like above them, and I make sure they know that. And I don't know if this is helpful or not, but what I usually say, and most people respect, is like, I'm always going to call you what you ask me to call you out of respect. I'm asking for the same level of respect. Do not, but I always make it serious. Like, when it comes to stuff like that, when it's how I view myself, I'm never like sometimes they'll say stupid stuff, like just jokes that I don't think necessarily are appropriate or whatever. I'm like, don't say that. Come on, but when it's like but it's not disrespectful. Like when they're doing that stuff, it's just like, that might be over the line. Like, come on. But like, I don't really care. But like, when it's stuff I care about, like my title, I am very clear of like, hey, like I've taken students outside of the class to talk to them. I was like, I'm not mad. I just want you to know that's not what you're gonna call me. Yeah. And that's okay. And I will call you whatever you want. I'll call you Mr., Ma'am, anything in between. Yeah. Like if you go by a nickname, like I will never judge you. I'll always call you that. I'm asking for that. Yeah. And I've never had an issue with it.
Yeah, treat people like you want to be treated. I feel like most people are like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it makes,
like kids can be like, oh.
Yeah, and most kids, we have so many kids who like go by different nicknames or family names. And it's, so it clicks so easily. So they're like, oh yeah, I guess you do call me the nickname I asked for. All right, my bad. And none of them call me Mr. because
they just call you Thomas.
They'll call me Mr. or Thomas. I think I have like 4 students who call me Mr. Thomas. It's just a lot of words for them, you know. Like some Thomas, but I'm like, I'm cool, and I've told him like I'm cool with Thomas. You're just not gonna call me my first name.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that's definitely something I'm a little more stricter on. And even like my job with Highland Lacrosse is a little bit more strict on.
Yeah.
Is like everyone is like coach this, coach that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, coach. If a kid, and there's a they're like middle school and high school, so it's like they're 12-year-olds. So I feel like there's a little bit more like, all right, like hey, like we're they know we're not on the same level. They'll do things just to like push your buttons. But sometimes they do it like accidentally and they catch themselves. They'll be like, Coach Mason.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's that 1 degree of separation of like I'm not in school with you.
Yeah, and even just to the point where like they'll be like, hey Mason, like can I go like do this? And I'm like, yep, and it's Coach Mason. They're like, oh my god, like yeah, you're right, my fault.
Yeah, when you don't
but I feel that in terms of like,
dude,
like it's something like I correct every time though.
Straight up. Yeah, well, I was gonna say when I was in college, I used to get I usually said professor because I didn't always know if they were a master's, doctor. Like you can't always know, but I was like, professor is obviously like a title.
That's overall.
And like I remember there was this one professor. I actually ended up like dropping her class because I would be like, hey professor, da da da, and she'd be like, it's doctor, but what? And I'm like,
that's weird.
I used a term of authority. Like I didn't just like I didn't call you Jane. I didn't call you Jane. But like I remember being like, I couldn't respect that because it was like I'm not actively being disrespectful. And it was the tone she used. Like if she was like, because I definitely had like, oh, like, da-da-da, and it's doctor, by the way. Like, it's one thing if you're like, I worked really hard for this, can you call me that? Versus like, don't speak to me, like, and I've always had issues with authority. Yeah. Dude, which is why, like, which does make it, like, that's why, like, when my students have, like, do something wrong, I usually don't crack down because I'm like, I don't like being talked to like you're above me, even if you're in charge.
Yeah.
Same with like coaches. It's like there can be coaches like, hey man, don't be a punk, do it, and that's like that can be friendly. It's like no, they're trying to push you, and it's like, yo, you're kind of a punk. Like if they talk down, like the second they talk down, you can use the same words.
Tone is everything.
Yeah. But yeah, sorry, this is not self-exploration at all. That's
but this is some of the process that we've gone through. It's,
yeah.
Different things like taking experience from like when we were in college and like how do we address people and taking that exploration of like now we're in these positions, how do we view it?
Yeah.
How you've dealt with authority and things like that is heavily affecting you as an authority.
Yeah, and I think, and actually, yeah, on the self-exploration, right, one thing I did explore is like who you kind of mentioned, like how you come off is super big on how you view yourself is super big on how people perceive you. And I think I would say, and you can disagree with me, but I think generally speaking, I come in with some like loose air of authority, not in charge, but just like I feel like I usually seem confident in most groups that I've stepped in.
Yeah.
But I think some of that is it's the security in knowing what I'm doing there. If it's family, obviously it's like different.
Yeah.
But like at work, I usually know or I'm confident that I'm competent. When it's sports, I know that I'm competent. I'm not like confident in all things, and I definitely used to be like insanely insecure in a lot of things, but usually in the groups I was in, I at least knew what I was good at.
You knew what you brought.
Yeah, and I think when you can figure out, I know we're about to like cut clips because the timer on the camera. Actually, let's wait. I'll do it on the next one.
I was like, did you just break the fourth wall,
One thing that would be very helpful if you guys are insecure is like, figuring out, I don't know what train I was going to say, so I'm going to go on this one. Figuring out what it is you bring or what you are doing there. And that can take a minute.
Yeah.
But if you've been invited, if you've been welcomed to speak, and I mean, even if like a teacher calls on you, right, in a class, like any kind of simple invitation, if you've been like, yo, come sit with us or whatever, like sometimes it can feel like I don't deserve to be here. These people are my friends. I don't know them. But usually there's a reason for that. And I think that was what I had to realize like growing up is like, okay, like people sometimes say I sound smart when I talk. So I can either disagree with like 12 people or maybe I sound smart when I talk. You know, like it wasn't what I thought of myself.
Yeah.
But it was like given circumstances, or it's like, okay, like my boss says like I'm a pretty good teacher. Like the kids like me. So even when I'm self-conscious or I'm dressed funny or my hair is whack or like a lot of these kids are like, you know, like a lot more hood than me, like I don't have to fake it because it's like, okay, if my boss is telling me that these kids like me for some reason, they must like me for some reason. And I can kind of like run in that lane, which can help me combat the many insecurities that I have. And the reason I say like that spin was one of them is like there's plenty of weird things I do where the kids will be like, did you just? And I'll just be like, yeah. And they drop it. Like, they're, you know, like, they're like, that was kind of weird. And I'm like, yeah, but it's, like, fine. And they're like, and no, like, they don't care anymore. Because it feels like confidence, and it really, I mean, for me nowadays it is, especially around like teenagers. Like, don't get me wrong, I care about you guys' like opinions when it comes to like speaking, but it takes a lot. It'll take a lot to break me down now. Love y'all, but if you're 14 and you're like, you're dumb, I'm like, okay.
That's funny. That's a good point though. I feel like having that level of confidence and knowing what you bring is a huge part of it, and I feel like that's where some of my nerves come from, like going into this class, because like I haven't done it before. I've done things like it, and I've done it in like different arenas, and so I'm trying to pull from those skills and those experiences to see how it goes onto this one. But that kind of leads into one of the other things like I'm exploring is like being a leader, like trying to teach, I like lead instead of like saying there's a hierarchy. Like no, I'm just
hierarchy feels weird.
I'm leading them through the class. I'm not. Whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's such a big part of it, and a lot of the exploration comes before, during, and after, identity development and going through all these different growth things that we've talked about. There's never really, I don't want to say never. I don't like to speak in absolutes. But I feel like there aren't a lot of
seldom.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of times where like exploration is bad. When you're trying to figure out who you are, when you're trying to figure out what you want to be and what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really important thing to do. And I feel like those are things we're kind of exploring in ourselves, and I guess somewhat in the world around us. Is there anything else you had in mind in terms of things around you? Like you talked about like hobbies and stuff, things that won't get you injured. I know that's something for me. I was actually just having that conversation because I've also torn my ACL twice. We're very good at that at this table. And so I'm like, I love to like go play like pickup and go like do all these things, but I'm like, man, like I really don't want to have to get surgery again or don't want to do something else. So yeah, things like podcasting. I'm trying to learn Spanish. I'm gonna try to learn some piano. I'm trying to pick up some other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, what other things are you kind of looking at?
I think.
And how do you look at those things?
Real. I think one of the things I'm looking at is like where I fit. I think in the world, I always want to have like a big impact. And in exploring that, I'm still like working on where I think I fit. The way that I do it is I look at people who have maybe done the thing before. So sometimes, like when I was exploring like a lot of stuff in myself, and I think where I fit in like the family, it was like, what skills do I know I have? And I think a really big thing to look at that a lot of times it's very easy, or it was very easy for me at least, was like looking at myself and being like super self-deprecating, like you didn't show up for this person, you didn't do this thing, like you suck, you're mean, you're like just so many, and that was like kept me up at night for years kind of thing, right? But I think what helped me get out of some of that was not looking at myself as much. Not looking at myself, but saying, okay, where is the need? Yeah. So it's not what am I good at, what am I bad at, which can be really good and really helpful, especially as like a place to start. But there's always there are literally billions of things in the world you can be good at, which means you're gonna be bad at most things. Like you can be good at 100 things. There's billions you're gonna be bad at, you know? So it's like that wasn't helpful for me in totality, because like I just kept coming up with stuff, like it always outweighed. But it was like, okay, like in the family, like, okay, where is the need? In relationships, where is the need? In the classroom, at the school, right? What are the needs of my students? Not just academically, but like socially, like personally, like, like there's things. So I think that is kind of how I've started to explore. And even in like what I want to do in the world is like, all right, what are the needs in the world? And then the other thing is like looking at people maybe who have done it before. And I realized like a lot of the greats, we're so just like focused, I think a lot of the times, on like the small thing. Yeah. It wasn't like, how can I change the world? I don't know that much about Mother Teresa, but we're gonna use her as an example. Shout out Mother Teresa. But she dead? Yeah. She's gotta be. I was old for 80 years. But like, when she was like giving some dude like some bread, right? She's not like, this will change the world. She was like, this dude needs bread. And the girl behind him in line needs bread. And you need someone to talk to, right? It was the thing like right in front of her. And she just kept filling the need. Yeah. And that led to like thousands and thousands of lives changed. And I think like when I think about even like at school, like as a teacher, like when I get annoyed, it's like, all right, like the student's not in the class they should be here. They're talking way too much. Or they're distracted. They're on the phone. They're not doing their work or like whatever. It's like, all right, but what's the actual need? Like, is the need that they need to do their math? Or is the need that they need to maybe limit some distractions or learn how to focus or be just recognized for good things? Like maybe they're bad at math and they've been told, like, and that happens a lot. It's like they've been told they're bad at math their whole life, so they're like, why would I have to? Like it's just a negative thing. So it's like, I had a student this week who was like, did like every problem wrong, but each time she was a little bit closer to doing it right. I actually said, like, as she was like kind of like doing like the last one before the bell rang, I was like, dude, like you're starting to get it. And she was like, I am, huh? Like, and she just like smiled. And it's like, again, she did all of them wrong. Like, but it was the fact that like she finally had someone say like, but you're getting better. And that was the need. The need wasn't that she had to get it right. But it's like I found like when I teach is like, and I know a lot of you guys like it, like I definitely lacked it in a lot of areas, but like when someone can show you how you're doing things well, it can change your perception on the fact that you can do things well.
Yeah.
And I mean that's something I got. Like I got that a lot from like Joseph Cabrera.
Government name.
Mr. Joseph from the Bronx. But like somebody pointed out, they were like, you always use, I think it was Raven or somebody, I always use first and last names. Like I'm always like, yeah, Michael Thomas. Like I'm never just like Mike. But like I got that a lot from like Joey, Edward. It's hard not to say his last name, but he like showed me in my head. Like I remember when I was like 16, maybe he was like maybe 15. He was like, if you call yourself a man, he was like, who am I to say you're not? And that was the first time I had felt like validated at that point. Like and I wasn't a man at that point, but like so many teachers had told me I wasn't like grown, even though I thought I was. So many coaches told me, you got so much to learn. And that was the first time he was like, who am I? If you are, then you are, and I'll respect you as such. And I was like, oh, shoot. And I've had so much like respect for him, like my whole life, like he might be on the podcast if he...
We're trying, man.
Dude, me and him call each other like 7 times. Like, we never caught each other.
Shout out to Edward, man.
But like stuff like... So I think, part of like my self-exploration has been where is the need and can I fulfill it? Because there are needs like, I'll never be like a motherly figure, right? It's not, I don't have that kind of like feminine energy necessarily, and I don't like, a lot of people need reassurance from their actual parents. So it's like, that's not a need I can fulfill, but it's like, oh, like you need someone to get groceries for you. I can do that. Yeah. Like I might feel like I'm absent, like I don't show up often, but I got a car, I got 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. I can show up and give you groceries. Yeah. And that has helped me be the person I want to be, which is like stability for the families. Because like, Toya said, like, oh, you show up for me when I need you to. And it's just that stuff. Pause. Wee.
He's grown on me.
I
don't like explored him too much.
There's some songs, shout out Tobe Nugwe. There's some songs where I'm like, not necessarily for me, but then there's some like, and like there was one thing he said like on a podcast that made me like want to, it like motivated me a lot. But yeah, I like a lot of his music. But one of the things he said actually was like, I'm here to make purpose popular. Which I really like because I do feel like a lot of people are like,
we're about that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are just like writing, and that's fine. Like especially when you know your life, but like I think a lot of people are afraid to seek purpose because there's guaranteed failure. Yeah. And he was like, nah, man, I'm here to make purpose popular. Like I'm here to help people, help kids, help whatever, figure out who they are. But that's a little tangent. So I feel like that's some of the questions I ask. That's kind of what I'm exploring in the world. I don't know the answer to like the need I can fulfill. I do think I'm empathetic because I've been so many people in my life. So many jobs, been the depressive, been the suicidal, been the did the drinking thing, the party thing, the student thing, like the triple job thing. Like I feel like I've had different roles, so I'm able to empathize a lot with different people. Yeah.
That's what experience does for you.
Yeah, man. I remember thinking that by the time I was like 23, I was like, I've lived too much life, man. This is exhausting. And now I garden.
It's a big one.
But for you, what would you say is like, I guess, how would you say you're exploring the world? How are you exploring? What are you kind of asking? Like, what's all?
I feel like how I'm exploring is I'm just starting to dig a little bit deeper into the things that I've had like slight interest in. So like there's so many things like in your life.
What gets you excited?
Yeah, there's so many things like in life where you just be like, I can never do that, so I just won't. But like you find it really interesting, and I'm starting to like peel those things back, and kind of like you were saying, I might be right. I probably can't do that to like an extent, but there's a lot of things with like music, especially. Like I love music, and everyone loves music, and I think that's true. But I've like really in the past. I mean, forever. Again, I've always loved music, but I feel like in the past,
go to a brand new studio session.
I need to. Right now.
I'm not kidding.
Shout out new.
Shout out new.
But I've really just like started to
wed. Sorry, bad pun. Continue.
newlywed new. I've really been starting to like really like man like I just connect with music so well, and I want to be able to like do some of those things. Like so many people around me are like musically gifted or just like know how to play an instrument really well. Like my roommate can play guitar very well. My girlfriend plays piano and plays guitar, and she sings and she writes music. Keith can play some guitar and some piano.
The intro to Sweet Child of Mine is all I retain, but I can still play it.
Exactly. And even I took like, and so I started to explore it a little bit. I took a like little rinky-dink piano class in like high school, and it was whatever. But then I took 2 piano classes in college, and that helped develop me a little bit more.
I knew that. Okay.
Yeah, I took like intro, and I took like piano workshop 2, where the final was actually like playing in a recital in front of like people, not a lot of people.
I didn't know this occurred.
Yeah, I had to play in front of. For the piano 1 workshop final, I had to play in front of the
Like
school.
5th grade parents. Okay.
Well, no, it was like it was like in front of the school, but there was like maybe 30 or 40 people.
No, that's
like
still
those parents.
nerve-wracking.
And then the piano 2 final was going. It was around like Christmas time, so we went to like a senior home and like
That's
played for like
100%.
50 seniors and like doctors and like
Interesting.
nurses and stuff, and played like Christmas songs as well as like some other things. And what I thought was very dumb about that experience. It was a really cool experience, and it was really nerve-wracking.
Here, no.
Some of them probably not, but my piano workshop teacher, who's like has her like PhD in like music theory, like is a phenomenal musician, pianist. She had like a protege that she was working with who was like who was also getting like her doctorate in music. Well, again, like played piano for like 20 years, and she had her go first. And and then she was like, and here's these 19-year-olds that just started playing piano.
Here's Beethoven.
Yeah.
And here's his brother.
Yeah. Literally. And we're over there like, jingle bells, jingle bells. She was playing like Mozart.
Right,
We were
just
like
symphony by herself.
like flawlessly. But yeah, like so I started to really build an interest in that, and I kind of lost that a little bit. But like now I'm looking to like try and buy a keyboard so I can like do piano lessons and like pay for them. Like I want to like get good at it. I want to be able to create music because it's something I love and enjoy so much. And so that's an interest I'm exploring. I don't think I'm like particularly musically inclined, but I know I have some rhythm. So I'm like, I feel like I can figure it out. And then just the other little thing is like when I traveled a lot last year, got out the country twice. Was very excited about that. Got to go to Spain with my Sibs. That was a phenomenal trip.
Over a year ago.
Yeah. And then got to go to Budapest with my girl and her family. That's in Hungary, over there in Europe. Shout out Budapest. Shout out Spain. But just like being
Shout out Catalan.
Facts. But just like being in other parts of the world where like it is very common and kind of the status quo where like everyone kind of speaks more than one language. I was like, man, we're slacking.
Yeah.
I know it's not a capacity thing because I'm like, I don't necessarily think all these people have like higher. Yeah, I don't think they have higher capacity than I. But it was just part of their culture. It's like you're in this part of Europe, so like we know Spanish and we know French and we know this. And like,
I was like in Barcelona, you're expected to know 2 if not 3. Like it's normal.
For like
just speak
for like the
convenient.
average person.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, obviously, in some parts of the U.S. that's not a necessity, but especially us like living and growing up in L.A., I would even say like, knowing Spanish is not a necessity, but it helps a lot. And especially in the populations we work with and the cities we work in, I'm like, dude, like it is so helpful to be able to know Spanish. I have so many kids that I work with that their first language was Spanish, so they like know English, but like, it would just be cool to be able to talk to their parents and have like full conversations, be able to communicate with their families, be able to communicate and learn more about their culture and what they do.
I was gonna say, I feel like when you learn a language, you also start to develop some cultural understanding because words don't always translate directly. So it's like, okay, what does this mean? And then they'll kind of like,
The phrasing will be
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
like even if like somebody said like, yo, this happened, I was like, no way. It's like, what does no way mean? Is you'd be like, well, I'm saying that there's no way that that could happen. Obviously, I believe you. It more so means I'm blown away. Like we have those things in our language.
Those little
But it's like you would have to learn that in like other languages too, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of the thing where like if you've talked to, I've like talked to people and they're like, oh, there's this joke in Spanish, and they'll like say it to another person that speaks Spanish, and they like crack up, like, oh, like tell me, and they're like, nah, man, it doesn't. They're like, it doesn't really translate well, and they'll like tell it to me, and I'm like, nah, it doesn't. But they were just cracking up.
Yeah. Have you heard the like Nintendo joke?
I don't think so.
It's like this like Mexican comedian. He's like, yeah, like my father and my mother, like I didn't speak Spanish growing up, so they called me Nintendo. And I was like, oh, like, I was like, Dad, like, why do you call me Nintendo? And he goes, because you don't speak Spanish. He goes, I don't get it. And he's like, yeah, I know. And no entiendo means I don't understand.
That's so perfect.
So like a lot of the crowd is laughing, and he's like, and I don't get why you guys are laughing.
That's really funny.
But it is, yeah, it's you can understand like cultures as
Yeah.
well, like other people's is
which is another interesting one. But no, that's something I've tried to learn, at least like now in my like adulthood, of different things like that I want to explore. I'm like, what's something that I'm not really good at, but has always been kind of like a loose interest of mine. I'm like,
that's what skateboarding was for me.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I suck at it. I can ollie and I can kind of straight skate forward. That's it. I don't drop. I don't do any other trick. But it was like, for me, it was fun to just ride and cruise. And I was like, this is something I wanted to do when I was little.
And especially in today's like digital age, and depending on like what you have access to, man, you can YouTube tutorial anything. You want to figure out how to build something, how to like work with computers, how to anything with technology, man, there is some out there that's free or relatively affordable to try to at least teach you the basics. So that's something like I kind of encourage. I feel like that's kind of the point of one of the points of this episode is to understand our experience with exploration. But to encourage you, it's like if you have a little interest in this, go look into it. Even you can even start with like a Google search and being like, how do I get into this? And be like, cool, here's a little boom, boom, boom. Here are the steps to achieve.
WikiHow on YouTube or
But yeah, that's been the biggest thing for me. Finding, exploring, noticing what the small interests are in my life, and just digging a little bit deeper into them. And it started to bring me some joy. And so I'm really excited to see how good at Spanish and piano I can be in the next 5 years or so if I really stay on it. So you watch out. I might become a Spanish musician.
Wow, that'd be crazy. Like just a little bit like Spanish guitar.
No,
I'm here for that. I think sincerely no idea.
Don't quote me on Billie Eilish.
Yeah, I think things you take interest in. Two of the things I want to do, but are more time. Part of why I haven't is they're more time consuming and more expensive. But I've had them on my mind for like years. One of them is like learning how to do basic mechanic work with my own car.
Yeah.
So like this doesn't count, but one of the things I learned to do like last week was like how to wax and buff a car by hand. Did I tell you about it?
Yeah.
Horrible. Something I didn't find in my research because I never thought to look was when you wax a car by hand, like no machine, anything, it's common to take 2 to 3 hours. With a machine, 22 an hour. So when I started doing it, I definitely learned the hard way as like it's starting to get dark and I'm starting to get bit by bugs and I'm like 3/4 done with my car, so I'm like I have to finish this. And then someone parked my car. They were like, hey, can I move your car? I was at my friend's house. And they put it in like the dirt part of their lot like 2 days later, so it was just covered in dirt. There's like, you can see the paw prints of the cat that walked across it. I was like, awesome, I'm really glad that I spent that time. But like basic like car care first and like detailing and stuff. But I want to learn like basic mechanics. Like I've done research into like how to change my own brakes. Oil changes I will never do because I don't want to, but they're pretty easy and I know how.
I've seen like
it's
on
paper,
paper, it's not that many steps.
Yeah, it takes no time at all. The reason I don't do it is like technically by law you're supposed to dispose of the oil a specific way, and I don't want to do the extra drive for that. That's the only reason. And I only end up paying like $20 in labor.
Because we're ethical out here.
We are. Yeah, I know some people just dump it, but like technically you're not allowed to do that, and I try not to break environmental laws. Yeah, very specific. And then like woodworking is one, but but it requires like some semblance of, even if I get like a basic couple of tools, those cost money. And it's just like not where I'm at right now. Yeah. It's just like I figure the goal is to like have a house in the next like 5 to 7 years, and then I can start to explore that stuff, put it in the garage. But I'm like, now's not the time. But it's stuff I haven't forgotten about even a little bit. So yeah, I think exploring the world, exploring myself is like, for you guys, like, think about what causes you joy, what makes you like, even like the slightest bit happy, or piques your interest, even if it doesn't make you happy.
Yeah.
And kind of like exploring that stuff. Like I mentioned a few podcasts ago, like part of why I like prioritize community is because like when I reflected, I was like, oh, all my most fun times are like just sitting around a table with my friends. So I started investing in that. It's like, oh, that's where I want to be. It wasn't going to, I do love going to movies, but it's like, that's not my happiest place. It wasn't, you know, going to restaurants even. It's like, no, like, because sometimes I'm thinking about money, or I'm thinking about this, or how we're going to split, like stupid stuff. So I think that's, yeah, when you're trying to figure out what you want to explore when it comes like a happy-ish, think about like just what brings you the slightest bit of joy or interest, and that's it. It's pretty simple.
I feel like, yeah, simple, not always easy, but
The name of the game.
worth it.
Yeah. And in that vein, is it worth it, right? Are there things that you are scared for yourself, within yourself, whatever it may be, to explore?
I feel like I definitely wrote that question down, and then I was like, man, I hope we don't
Now I
ask
have
that.
to answer.
I was like, I hope we don't get to that.
I've done that where I've like asked people questions and they ask them back, and I was like, huh,
Yeah.
you got me there.
Where'd you get that one from, man? You need your last ha. And I was in Texas, I could not stop saying that. I'm stalling. What
I'm scared to explore this question. Next
I'm
question.
scared to explore. I don't know. I feel like I have gotten a little less fearful of self-examination. Like we've talked about in the past, like reflection is very important for growth, but it's definitely not easy, and you can uncover a lot of not fun things about yourself. I feel like in the past year or two, I've realized that aside from having ADHD and like getting distracted easily in those ways, that I've noticed about myself that I'll procrastinate things sometimes because I feel like I just won't do a good job at it, so I don't want to put effort into it. And I feel like that's I think that's something like a lot of people can relate to in some aspect. Is like the whole if you've been told you're not good at something, you're like, why would I give full effort into it and try to do it?
Yeah, it's gonna suck anyways.
yeah.
I might as well do it. What lazy you?
And some people have the mindset, and I have this mindset in other places where it's like, you tell me I can't do it, or like watch. And I feel like I have that mindset in like sports and like in
it's
other
like
things
things you
where
know
it's
you
like,
can do.
yeah, things that I have a little bit more confidence in. Even when I was younger though, I still felt like I had some of that where I was like, no, like I can do this. But I think especially for me when it comes to things like academics and things that require a lot of like intellect, for lack of a better word, that's something that I'm not as forwardly confident in, and so I'd be less likely to try. And that was something that like I explored and kind of discovered about myself, and I feel like in a weird, not twisted way, but like it was something like I prayed a lot about to like kind of be uncovered and try to figure out, and then I feel like God put me in a lot of positions where it's like, now you get to practice, and I was like, wow,
Never mind.
I was hoping you'd just kind of give it to me. But I feel like that's always how that goes, is like when you, and I mean, that's my religious belief, that's how I feel about those situations, but I feel like that's often just how it is like, it's like, man, like I wish like I could do this or I could do that, and it's like often, you know, if you're like, man, I wish I could like bench this certain way, you're not gonna like
Just
wake
jump
up one
on
day
it,
and be able to do it, but you can get down and start doing push-ups. You can have the opportunity to start to build those things.
Towards it.
And that can be scary. I feel like that was something that I was scared of, was like was like exploring. I think just what I'm trying to say is like exploring my insecurities.
Yeah.
That's something that I have been hesitant to do in the past. I'm still very, very hesitant to do and kind of take on like piece by piece. But I have found that I've been given a lot of opportunities to not only explore them, but like face them, and kind of build upon them and have opportunities to build more confidence in those areas that I've previously felt insecure. And that has been very rewarding, but not always easy.
And fun?
Not always fun. But at the end, it's kind of cool when you're like, oh, like I did that. And those are some of the moments that we talked about, like first episode, that I'm like most proud of. I probably didn't frame it in this way, but like just being able to say like when it came to things like school and like work and like my relationships, like those were things I was really insecure about, and how I was perceived and like how I behaved and who I was in those situations. And then I've just had a lot of opportunities to work through those areas.
Yeah.
And I've been able for a lot of them to kind of come out on the other side, and some things I'm still very much working through. But yeah, I think as part in terms of what part of my life am I scared to explore, it'd definitely be like my insecurities. Yeah. Do you have any for yourself?
Insecurities?
Are you scared of anything?
No. Hornets.
Fair.
Kind of, actually. When I was painting once, I had to paint over a vent with a spray gun, and I didn't know there was a hornet's nest inside. And I was on a roof, so you can't like run. I was just like, fudge. And actually, honestly, it's helped my fear of hornets because like I got stung like 8 times, and I was like, does this hurt? Absolutely. Am I dying though? Honestly, like I guess I'm stoned too. But I did learn like, oh, I can survive this. So sometimes I'm like, I'll see a hornet, I'm like, this has happened already. I know I'm not allergic.
Yeah. You're like, you could sting me, I could kill you.
Yeah. Let's go 1-on-1. His buddies say, run it back. So are there things I'm scared? There's plenty I'm scared of.
Things you're scared to explore.
Things I'm scared to explore, like within myself.
Or the world.
In the world. More. Many more.
The bottom of the ocean.
No. That's for rich people. That's some shit I shouldn't have thrown. If you want to know how to conquer your fears, keep them coming, you know?
Facts.
Yeah, there are plenty of things within myself I've been afraid to explore and that I am afraid to explore. I'll go first because I feel like this is more immediately relatable and it's stuff I've like overcome, like the depression stuff. So I'm diagnosed bipolar depressive, and that like exploring my depression, trying to overcome it was really, really hard growing up because like even when I would do really well, and this is before I knew, I would always crash. So one thing I was like afraid to explore is like think about why I'm depressed. And I mean, you know, the triggers could be so hair thin at one point to go send me into the next crash. And also like I'd be afraid to like explore, seek happiness.
Yeah.
Because I was so convinced, it's like loosely accurate, that I was always gonna crash again. So like even when I would do great, I'd be like there are times, you know, like, oh, I think I'm finally out of it. I figured, you know, this routine is working, this workout is working, you know, and then I'd crash again and be like, nothing works, nothing's worth it, you know, like staying in bed for days at a time kind of thing. Like it was like, it could get really, really bad. So I think I was afraid to explore that. I didn't even want to go to therapy because I'd been to like a handful of therapists and they all sucked. It's just the reality. Like Craig was awesome. I think he was like my 4th or 5th. Everyone else sucked. Like I had one dude who was like, yeah, you're pretty self-aware, so I think you'll be fine. And I like did some very destructive stuff just to spite him. Like I was like, dude, I don't need you. Like, you know, just whatever. So I think that was something I was really, really afraid to explore, was like my emotional capacity, my emotional maturity, because I thought like I'm just a depressive flake, basically. Like, you know, when I get super depressed, I just wouldn't show up to things, would turn my phone off for days. So I didn't want to explore that because I was like, all I'm going to find out is that I suck. And I do now. And I did sometimes, but it wasn't because of that I did. And that's what exploring helped. So I think like when you said it's worth, like it is. Like I learned a lot of tools and coping mechanisms that help me get out of things quicker or keep it not as deep. So it's not like I don't I'll say I don't crash, right? I might die, but I don't crash the same way.
Got it.
I think the things I'm afraid to explore nowadays actually also have to do with like intelligence and like self-establishment. I think in like high school, it was easy to establish my place, so to speak, in like sports. I was really good at the sport I played. I had the work ethic to be the best at it at our school, right? And I don't think there's like questions about that.
No.
Even like college, starting as a freshman, the only thing my coach said was like, hey, you're too aggressive, you're a liability. Cleans that up. Yeah, fair. I was getting a lot of penalties. But I cleaned that up, stayed starting all 4 years, right? Like it's like stuff like that, like I knew where I was. Even in like, you know, like my bio class in college, it's like getting a 94, okay, I'm competing with that. Like I knew where I was in my immediate surrounding. And I think nowadays where I have some fear is like the world is so big and there's so many careers and relationships. Like I'm trying to be really good in the places that I am currently at, like my job and like my family, but I think there are still a lot of doubts of like, am I doing enough? Can I do more? Do I have the capacity? Like, I do look at people who have done like amazing, great things, and I'm like, I'm not that person. Like, I exhaust, I get tired, I get sad, I want other things. Like, I don't think I have that networking ability or that, you know, like there's so many, like, I feel like I fall short so far. And then the other thing is like I've thought about like going back to school to have basically like to learn some of those skills and like, can I do more?
Yeah.
And a big fear is like, am I smart enough? Like, my worst depressions was when I was in college. Like, the level of stress that it like sent me through.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm scared to go back to school. I'm scared to like put myself through really, really strenuous. Like, now if I get really, really stressed, I can like establish, all right, I'm not taking work home with me, work out a schedule, like, you know, like I can make it work. But it's like, if I have an essay due, I have an essay due, and that's just how that works.
Yeah. That's one of the toughest things about that level of school is like there's always something to do.
Yeah, and then I'm also like, can I even get into school? Like, that would be such a blow for me if I like apply to these schools and just don't get in. Like, that's like a you're not good enough. And it's not true, but it is something like I fear and I know I'll take personally. I think I've thought about like writing, like before, like writing a book or like and
so like poetry and you've written
and I've started stuff that like no one has ever seen, because I'm like, what if I'm not saying things that are good enough? What if no one wants to hear what I have to say? What if I'm wrong? Like, there's so many just like, what if I'm not smart enough? What if I'm not good enough? What if my worldview is so, you know, I'm relatively solitary. Like, I do love my community, but like, I for sure refresh alone. So it's like, what if I'm just blind to the way that things actually are? Like, what I knew 5 years ago is so different than what I knew today, and it's so different than what I knew 5 years before. Like, I'm like, I could, like, in 5 years, I might be like, everything I thought was wrong, which I think is fine.
I'm glad that you're open to that.
Sorry. Which I know is fine, but like, it's still like scary. Like, I'm like, I don't want to, let's say I publish a book and I think I'm super right and I agree with all of my saying. Like, I wouldn't publish something I don't agree with. I don't say stuff I don't agree with typically, unless I'm joking.
And that's a joke.
But like, what if I do that and like some stuff comes out and says like I'm completely wrong, I misled a bunch of people and I like hurt a bunch of people. Like, that's like for sure a fear, and that's if I can even get off. The other alternative is just like no one even cared for what I had to say, and that to me is like something I've had to like accept the last couple of years. Is like, I like being seen. I don't have to be seen by everybody, but like when I hit a new max, I like to let a couple people know. Like, one thing I actually meant to tell you is like my physical therapist, I'm only a couple months out of surgery, and he was like, bro, honestly, that knee's amazing. That's like Adrian Peterson level knee. But he had me doing today in my workout by myself, I was doing pistol squats on my like bum leg.
Dang.
Yeah, I'm doing pistol squats on both, like not all the way down yet, because I don't have the range of motion yet. But I'm doing pistol squat, lateral lunge, and then weighted like for like 30.
That's incredible.
Right. So even like stuff like that, like as soon as I heard that, I was like, yo, Dad, just so you know, like, you know, like I like being seen. And so I think a fear with like really putting myself out there, even like with this podcast a little bit, but this is more for you guys than for me, which I think is why I'm more comfortable with it. And then I do question my motivations, like, is this for me or for you? You know, when it comes to like the book and the this and that.
Yeah.
But I think one of my fears is like, if I put myself out, like my real self out to be seen, I don't know how that's going to be received.
Yeah.
And, you know, if everyone agrees that I'm an idiot, because that's how I've like established some of my confidence is like, you know, like most people say I'm kind of worth listening to, or like most people say I'm relatively muscular, so I'm not insecure in my body. I gained a lot of weight this last couple of years, but I know like, it's like in my head I'm like, it's fine. But if one day everyone was like, you're fat, you're ugly, and you're stupid, and it was everybody, like how can I argue with that? Yeah, if it's everybody I meet, then it's like, oh crap. Like, versus like if I even have one person saying like, no, you're not, it's like, okay, they're not lying to me. Like, it's someone I trust, you know? So I think my fear, like I definitely still have all of those insecurities.
Yeah.
One I got rid of was my height. Today I was sitting on the bench press thing, the seated, and my legs are dangling like 6 inches off the ground. I was like, whatever. Yeah, so I think that's where most of my fears lie. One thing I want to leave you guys with is like how to kind of start overcoming those fears. I think for me, there's two main things I do, and one of them sucks. It's straight up facing them. I like that like Will Smith quote is like, do it scared. It's like, yo, like I'm really scared. Cool, do it scared, and that actually does help me a lot. It's like even like in weightlifting and maxing and stuff. Like sometimes I'm like, yo, this could really go south. And it's like, but I know what I'm doing. I know how to safely lift, and that applies to like other areas. It's like, it's okay to be scared and do it scared. So that really helps. And then the other thing that I've gotten better at, and this is the thing that sucks, is evaluating failure. Because the part that sucks is if you fail, like you did actually fail. Like, and for me, I think I, like internalize, like I take it in. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm an actual failure in this thing. And sometimes people be like, you didn't fail, you. But it's like, no, I actually did. Like, this is a thing that I tried to do that was not successful. And so like accepting the failure part of how I do that is recognizing that that is not all of who I am for anything. And that it's not all that I have to offer. And it may not be where my genius is, so to speak. There's this quote from this book by Robert Bly where he talks about where your hurt is, there your genius is also. And most of the stuff I've been really good at is the stuff that was really, really bad for me as a kid, right? Like horrible relationships with teachers, hated school, and that's like where I love to be. It's where what I'm best at.
Because it's something. Also, in some ways, it's something like you saw a hole in.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, like I know I can do that.
Well, and that's exactly what it is. It's where your hurt is what you've probably explored. It's what you spent time thinking about. It's what you spent time experiencing. So I really like that quote. So I think even when it comes to like failing, it's accepting like, okay, maybe this. I thought I was gonna be a medical doctor. Like when I went to college, I was like certain, and I did not get good enough grades to do that. Like that's just a true thing that is established. But it's like, okay, I'm still able to do really good things, and it took me a couple years to figure out what exactly I wanted to do. So, but I think it's recognizing that I have so much more time than I think that I thought I had. I mean, even like my goal was to go straight out of college. Like I look like Nate, who's just submitted all his school applications. I look at Danusha, who just got into med school. Right, Danusha's like 29 to 30. Nate's 26. His birthday just passed. So it's like, even like my brain was like, I gotta be a doctor by 25. And realistically now I've realized like if I really wanted to, I could study for the MCAT, I could get a job, 3 years experience, I could go back to med school with my mid GPA. Like I was saying though, sorry we got cut off y'all, is even now, like I've realized as I've aged, is that you're never too late basically. You can still go back to school. You do have to like redevelop the skills. Like if my GPA is not med school worthy, I would have to go back to a job, start base level, work a few years, but get experience in the field. And they'll look at the experience more than they'll look at just the GPA. And that's a lot of jobs, that's a lot of careers, that's a lot of schools. But it took me a while to realize. So even when it comes to maybe failing in what I wanted to, it doesn't lock me into where I am. I can either go back with a different skill set, reinvest, or reevaluate where I want to be. So even though it can be really, really scary for me, I think that's something that has given me confidence. And I think it's especially scary the first time or second time around. But once you do it once, you're like, oh, this is possible. Or once you know somebody who's done it once, right?
Once you've seen it happen.
Yeah, because you see the big stories on TV, but those are hard to relate. But like once you see a friend or two do it, it's like, okay, this is possible. Like honestly, like Danusha's especially was like super inspired. Like I texted, like I was so excited when I saw that, because it's like,
shout out to Nunu,
because he's not one of those dudes where it's just like, oh, like I mean he's super smart. This is gonna sound rude, but like it was one of where it wasn't like, oh, I got it perfect the first time. Like a lot of people, I think we see that, and it's not encouraging. It's like, well, I didn't, so what do I do? And he was like, you put your head down, you get to work. And that's all it was. So I think that helps me when I'm scared with these kinds of things. That helps me go, okay, here's what I can do, is do it scared, and if I fail, reevaluate.
100%. And I feel like that, like you kind of touched on it a little bit. You brought up a Will Smith quote. I don't know if this is a Will Smith quote or if he was quoting someone else, but something else he said a few years back was he was like, some of the most beautiful things in our lives are just on the other side of fear. And I think that has a lot to do with like doing things scared. Is like sometimes that can open up gateways. But something else of a way I kind of view fear, and this quote that I got from this book that I'm reading right now, it's from a pediatric neurosurgeon, so someone that does brain and spine surgeries on kids, usually with like cancer or like terminal illnesses and like very, very serious things. and he was talking about like new technologies and like trying new practices, and people being scared too because they don't want to mess up their success rate, like how well they do the surgery. And the quote that he said in the book was, "The price of doing nothing is always worth more than the cost of risking failure." And kind of how I interpret that is like, hey, look, like if you don't do anything, then you know exactly what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You're not gonna achieve what you want. You're not gonna develop that skill. You're like that's easy. You know you'll never get there if you don't do anything, if you don't try anything. And so I think that's that's the price of doing nothing. You know how much it's gonna be. But how much you can get from even just risking failure, you can get so much further. Even if it's just like, okay, I learned that this is not the right way to do it. Even if you do fail, it's like, I learned that this is just not the best way to do it.
Yeah.
In this scenario for like...
Well, and you still know something. Like, if you don't do anything, I think a lot of people have lived in the, I wonder what would have happened if. And that has, like, destroyed people.
Absolutely.
Like, just their psyche. Like, what would have happened if I had talked to that girl? What would have happened if I had, if I had studied? Like, what I remember that was for me is like, what if I had slept more before my exam? Would I have done better? But I was so worried that I was studying, like.
Yeah. But I think that's like kind of the biggest thing for me when it comes to like exploration or just trying anything new, and trying to push through that fear. It's understanding that I know if I don't do anything, that nothing more will come of this.
Yeah.
And I think having that general fear of not being able to achieve is going to be what's going to haunt you a little bit more down the line. So that's not to say you have to do it right now or it'll never happen. That's completely contradictory to what you said.
Yeah.
You have time to figure these things out for the most part.
Yeah. But there's a difference between nothing and not right now, too.
Yes. Yeah, that's true too. There's a difference between nothing and not right now. And I feel like that's one of my biggest, just in general, one of my biggest qualms with things, one of my biggest issues with like the government, or with like other institutions like education and healthcare is sometimes they'll be like, we have this really big issue and here's this possible solution to it, and people are like, but what if this happens, and what if this happens, and what if this happens, so we're just not going to do anything.
Yeah.
And there's some merit to that where like, yes, let's weigh our options, but it's again that thing of like, cool, so we're just going to keep doing nothing and the same thing's going to keep happening.
Yeah.
We're going to keep seeing the same results. People are still going to, people are still just going to be negatively affected because we're just too scared or nervous to try anything. Yeah. We're not saying don't weigh the cost. Look at it.
For sure, yeah.
Look at it.
There's things you might be like, this isn't worth it, but you do want to know.
Yeah.
It does, you can keep going. But it makes me think of, Steve used to say it all the time, and it was kind of annoying. But it was real, it's like, what would you rather live with? The pain of discipline or the pain of regret?
Absolutely.
Right? It's like, you're gonna be in pain, you're gonna suffer, you're gonna struggle one way or the other. Do you want to sit on the couch and think, man, I coulda, woulda, shoulda? Or do you want to be in pain while you're doing it? It's like, man, this is hard, right? And you get to pick which one of those paths you take.
Yeah, and I think just another thing for me when I start thinking about the person that I want to be, and the man that I want to be known for being, is a person that was known for trying. Like, I don't want to be the person that was like, man, they couldn't achieve this and they did nothing about it. Maybe it's just, oh man, this dude couldn't achieve it, but dude, he went for it.
Yeah.
Like, he grinded for it. And for some people, they don't want that. They don't want to be known as like, man, I tried really hard and I didn't get that. And that's fine. But that's one of the things I've explored about myself is like, I really want to be known, and want to be a person who gives full effort and really tries to problem solve, or really tries to improve and impact people's lives. And maybe things I'm doing now aren't the best ways to do that, but I'm doing something. And I mean, kind of like what we kind of talked about a little bit off camera, but when I kind of went into my graduate school program originally, I was like, I want to work, for like the State Department and create like this big change that's going to affect millions or like hundreds of thousands of people. And right now, I'm doing a job that's affecting a few dozen people, and it's in my immediate community, but it's wonderful and it feels great. And that's not to say that I can never get to that point, but just because I'm not at that point doesn't mean I won't be, doesn't mean I can't be. But it's better than not doing anything.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Probably the last quote I have, and then we'll probably, I don't know, whatever, is I remember this helped me get through stuff a lot when I was younger, like really, really battling like the depths. Somebody was like, you know, something that I appreciate about you, Keith, and I never viewed myself this way. Is I always just knew I ended up down, right? And I was like, I'm always down, or I'm always gonna get knocked down. And he said, like, one thing I appreciate you, and it was like this Bible scripture. He was like, the man of, like, it's not noble character or whatever, but it's like something like that, is the person who falls down 7 times but gets up 8. And he was like, and I've always seen you as that kind of thing. And I never saw myself as that kind of dude at that point in my life, but that, like, changed a little bit how I felt about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Is like, I hated that I would always get knocked down, but like sometimes, and it was only sometimes, like it didn't always fix or help me feel better, but it was like, you know what, man, I can get up again. I can fail and I can get up again, and I can fail and I can get up again, and I can fail. And it's like, truth be told, in my experience, the more you get up, the easier it is. It hurts and it's hard. Like, I don't want to make it sound like it isn't, but it's like, if you get up once, you realize that you can. If you get up twice, you're like, okay, I still can. If you get up like 4 or 5 times, you realize I'm always gonna get back up.
Yeah.
So I can go get knocked down again. And I think that's something that like has helped me a lot.
That's huge.
Yeah, like even in tackling so many of the things I feel like I've tried to, is it's like I've figured out now that I will always be okay. I've established the tools and the patterns and the behaviors in the community to know no matter how bad it gets, I know how to make sure I'm always okay. And it took me a while. I wasn't always there.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've gotten there now. Yeah.
Do it scared.
Do it scared, y'all. And we'll do it with you. Thanks for tuning in.
Absolutely.
This has been the And His Brother podcast.
Have a great day, y'all.